The art style of Halo is a very controversial topic within the community, and for good reason. Bungie spent a decade perfecting the UNSC's very old school and sci-fi aesthetic, and fans of the series had now spent the last 11 years learning how a shotgun should look. So when 343's made their debut with Halo 4, fans weren't too happy with the designs. These games, however, controversial as they were, introduced new people to the franchise, and in doing so, people started seeing 343's designs as the Halo look. So the question is, how do you please both sides? Greetings, Redesigning here. This is the first episode in my new series, Redesigning Halo, where I'll be taking a look at the different artistic visions seen throughout the Halo games and put my own spin on it. And in this video, I'll be covering some of the UNSC weapons, and see if I can come up with designs which please as many fans as possible, drawing inspiration from both Bungie's and 343's games. I do want to note, I'm no gun expert. I'll only be focusing on the design itself, so please excuse any inaccurate gun terms. Without any further ado, let's begin. What better way to start this off than everyone's favorite 3-round burst, the battle rifle. When it was first introduced in Halo 2, the design was simple, yet effective. The most notable features being the carry handle, the long-range scope, and the bullpup design. Halo 3 kept the overall look, but gave it a longer barrel, a more sharp design, and made the top part of the weapon grey. This is what I'll be using as my inspiration. In Halo 4 and 5, we saw a very different battle rifle. The design was more futuristic and had a more blocky look to it. The scope was also replaced with smaller optics. The gun has a very aggressive silhouette, however, which I like, so I'll be using this as my base. And this is the design I came up with. My goal here was to keep the aggressive and angular look of the Halo 5 BR, while still giving it the BR flair of the Halo 3 design. So I shortened the front part of the gun and elongated the barrel to give it the classic look. I also gave it the old color scheme of grey and black. I removed Halo 5's lines and logo to make sure the design wasn't too cluttered for the classic art style. And what would the classic battle rifle be without the scope and the iconic triangles along its sides? The end result really feels like a 343 battle rifle pretending to be a Bungie design, but in a good way. The sniper rifle has made an appearance in every Halo game to date, and for good reason. What stood out the most about it in Combat Evolved was its flat neon green scope, unlike anything previously seen. How this scope was used, I have no idea, but it was definitely the standout feature in the games, all the way to Halo Reach. This sniper had the overall look of the previous ones, such as the Halo 3 scope, the bipod, and the bluish grey as a secondary color. It did, however, introduce some complexity to the design, making it a bit more blocky and aggressive instead of round and soft. These two designs will be my inspiration. Halo 4 and 5 made sure to give the sniper its iconic silhouette, but not much more than that. The scope was shortened, but still wide, but it now featured a circular scope inside of it, sort of replacing the classic flare. The design was, strangely enough, simplified, making it only silver and black, instead of Bungie's rather complex set of colors. This design will be my base. And here's my design. I'll admit, At first glance, there's barely anything left from Halo 5 in there. I straight up ripped the scope and barrel off of Halo Reach's design, and the color scheme is pretty much the exact same. Although, I decided to keep the intense black parts from Halo 5's version, and kept the magazine black, whereas Halo Reach's is silver. To capture the very elongated look of Halo 3's version, I decided to extend the stock, and separated it from the grip. I also made sure to straighten out the more curved areas of the Halo 5 design, to make it a bit more blocky. And as a final touch, I added a green light and a UNSC logo, to capture that old school sci-fi feel. And as I'm writing the script, we actually got our first look at the sniper rifle in Halo Infinite. And I kinda got the scope right, and the placement of the UNSC logo, called it. The design turned out good, but fairly safe. It's a pretty standard Halo sniper rifle. Not much more to it. The saw is a very interesting one, seeing as it's an original weapon created by 343. We've seen machine guns in Halo 2, 3, and Reach, but these weren't guns you could carry around like any other gun, so they never served the same purpose. But just so I know what Bungie's vision of an LMG looked like, I'll go with Halo 2's version as my inspiration. And to make this a little easier for me, I'll also include a bit of Halo 3's assault rifle and battle rifle, since that's as close as I'll ever get to a light machine gun in that game. The design seen in Halo 4 and 5 is very clearly a light machine gun, with its huge drum magazine, the thick barrel, and just the all-around beefy look. What's interesting is the fact that it actually took some inspiration from Halo 2's design, these holes in the front part. But beyond that, it's pretty much an entirely new design. For obvious reasons, this design will be my base. And this is what I came up with. I decided to keep the holes, as that part of 343's design really had that old school feel. One of the first things that changed, however, was the magazine. Having it tilted didn't really resonate with me. And looking at Bungie's machine gun, it was clear having it perfectly vertical was the classic way. I also decided to remove the top part of the 343 design, since the classic design had that elongated and plain look. I also felt it hindered the possibility of attaching optics, so I even took the liberty of adding a rail, to give it more of a militaristic feel. I extended the back part of the gun by giving it the Halo 2 style stock, but that wasn't enough. I felt it was still too complex, so I simply stole the grip from Halo 3's AR and gave it some of the green lights. And finally, I gave it the iconic triangles of the VR, and replaced the UNSC text with a classic logo instead. The end result, honestly, isn't too bad. I was never a huge fan of the design of the saw, but I feel like the classic features really goes well with the design 343 came up with. It wouldn't be a Halo game without the shotgun. This close-range monster hasn't skipped out on a single installment, but it's seen a few different designs. The shotgun we saw in the trilogy didn't change much from game to game. Halo CE had a longer barrel, Halo 2 was shorter, and Halo 3 was somewhere in between. There were of course other changes, such as the lights on the iron sights, but overall they kept the same iconic look. This design was very sleek and simple, with a clear distinction between the grey and the black parts. In Halo Reach, however, Bungie was going for something a bit more tactical. The design introduced new parts to the gun, such as a third quote-unquote barrel, and 5 holes along the rail, instead of the indentations seen in the previous designs. The colors were also more washed out and grimy, instead of the fairly clean look of, say, Halo 3's design. To most accurately represent Bungie's art style, Halo 3 and Reach will be my inspiration. In 343's games, the design changed once again, and this time even further away from the original design. While it's clear it's a shotgun, the fact that it's a Halo shotgun isn't that obvious. The barrels are barely visible, and the forend is much shorter than previous designs. The gun has this really exciting design because of its good mixture of straight and diagonal lines, which gives it the feeling of motion. Probably what stands out the most is the amount of detail. It keeps the holes along the rails from the Reach design, but adds a ton of new indentations and protrusions along its surface. The color scheme also decreased the contrast between the dark and the light parts. This design will be my base. And this is my design. I personally like the diagonal lines from 4 and 5's design, so I somehow wanted to include that in my design. I also kept the holes as they're a nice callback to Reach's design, but I made sure to decrease the amount of detail surrounding them. I wanted to come up with something which paid tribute to all previous barrels, so I made the bottom two Halo 3 style, and included an additional one above them, like Reach. I also made sure to bring the colors back to the early games, with clear grey parts and black parts. The part that's easy to miss is the trigger guard, where I brought back the piece attached to the left side of it. And finally, as you can clearly see, I also made the forend much more elongated, and added a green light next to it, akin to Reach's red one. What can I say? I'm just a big sucker for green lights. What we ended up with is a design relatively well balanced between all iterations. The silhouette bearing the most resemblance to the classic design, while having many of the new version's details. And finally, we have what many would consider the most iconic weapon in the series, the Magnum. Besides its silver and grey color scheme, it's easily recognizable by the huge trigger guard, the recoil mitigating weight, and the sheer size of the thing. We've seen a few exceptions to this, such as the Halo 2 version, but overall, this is the Magnum design. I'll be using Halo 3 and Reach as my inspiration. While Halo 4 changed a lot of the designs of the Halo universe, the Magnum was surprisingly well depicted. It had the color scheme, the weight, and the trigger. What set it apart was mostly the very bulky design. When Halo 5 came around, that's when 343 decided to put their own true spin on it. This iteration of the Magnum went for something much darker and complex, while still keeping the overall silhouette of its predecessors. The grip was also turned into something a bit more comfortable, instead of the very metallic and clunky look of the previous ones. Due to the very skinny and compact look, I think this will be very interesting to use as my base. And here's what I came up with. When first looking at it, it seems the only thing I changed was the colors. But if you take a closer look, there's much more that gives it the classic Magnum look. First thing I fixed was making the weight bigger. When I think of the classic design, first thing that always comes to mind is the comically large weight. I also gave the part underneath the Reach look, and I even added a red light. No, you're not crazy. I actually didn't make it green this time. I extended the back part of the gun, and even made the grip a bit more blocky. Something I've always loved with the Halo 3 design is the magazine that's a bit too big for the gun itself. So I extended the mag and gave it a silvery look to really frame the whole design. Besides small changes, such as the simplified trigger guard, that's mostly the changes I made. The end result is a design which has most of Halo 5's details, but is clearly paying tribute to the designs which came before it.
And there we have it. Those are all of the redesigns I came up with for the time being. Let me know what you think. Did I succeed in making something in between the old art style and the new? Which one is your favorite? And be sure to let me know if you want me to make more of these. Maybe the rest of the UNSC weapons, or something entirely different. If you like this video, give it a like. If not, a dislike. And let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I wish you all the best, and take care. Redesigning out.